As the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. And despite the bitter ending that was Game 7, the 2025 Pacers were certainly a very good thing that deserves to be celebrated. Joining me to both ruminate and reminisce about the harsh conclusion to their incredible run while also looking ahead at what comes next in response to patron only questions that were sent in is once again Samson Folk wrapping up our respective run as the front running video podcasters.
Yeah, always the front runners. It was God, what a fun adventure to go through, honestly. I feel incredibly lucky, not only in this industry, in this business is it special to be able to curate an audience that engages with your work rather than consumes it like junk food and you don't put out slop and all that kind of stuff, but to with a dear friend kind of dive into basketball and talk about it. Not only was this, a playoff run that enriched me as a basketball writer, but as a basketball fan, because listener, viewer, I learned from Caitlin the same way that you did. And I feel really lucky to have had it, even though it ended the way that it did. It's a special run for a special group of guys.
Lou Dort before Game 7 had a quote about like, well, this is the last day of school, and on the last day of school, you give it your all. I'm like, that's not really what the last day of school is like. But this does feel like the last day of school in terms of I'm hoping it can be somewhat of a celebration while also, as everyone can see from my name, I attempt to be the Pacers therapist that people may need. You wouldn't have seen it because I don't know how much time you're spending on Blue Sky these days, but after that game was over, somebody tagged both of us and was like, I really just need to hear your voices right now.
This actually goes back to when the Raptors first started being bad, and I used to do a live reaction podcast after. I used to put it wasn't Samson Revoke or Samson Woke. It was Raptors therapist for like a whole season, basically.
The plan for today's episode is to put a bow on the season and also answer some inquiries headed into next season. This isn't exactly the direction of the Mailbag podcast that I was expecting to take, but it is a
hmm
Mailbag podcast in which both of us are going to try to answer a wide array of questions that came in, spanning both the emotional, the strategic, the tactical, the fun, and that's how we're going to wrap this up. So the first question comes from Matthew Hogg. Just one question. Why do we do this to ourselves? I answered this question in full as my recap to the season at Basketball She Wrote. It's rare that I write about basketball without writing about actual basketball, but I'm hoping that's a piece that many Pacer fans are going to connect with, basketball fans in general are going to connect with. It isn't paywalled. So if you want to know what my full answer to this question is, you can head over there and click the link or go on Blue Sky or go on Twitter. I'm sure you'll find it there. It's titled Moving On from Game 7 Without Letting Go of Game 7. The other reason I'm doing this is you can read my answer because I don't need to get weepy at the start of this podcast. Samson's already seen enough of that from me over the course of us doing this in 2 seasons. So I'm going to let him provide his response, assuming he can keep his emotions under control.
Yeah, we'll try. We do it because hope springs eternal. Honestly, the Raptors were laughing stocks for a long time and hit a battering ram repeatedly in the name of LeBron James and were embarrassed to the point of no return, basically. And still, there was a path to a championship that formed. And, Kyle Lowry was a special point guard that was able to make greater than the sum of its parts teams constantly. And I think Tyrese Haliburton can be better than Kyle Lowry was over the course of his career. And Tyrese has that same quality. And the lasting image from game 7 was not a basketball play for me. It was the too intimate zoom in onto Tyrese that like really was unsettling. And when stuff like that happens, it's a good man, something like truly the worst thing. And it becomes not up to anyone else, but it becomes even unfairly on the shoulders of Tyrese once again to quell everybody and say, like, I'm okay, I'm coming back. And of course he did. And so, you know, you do this to yourselves because you believe in the team and you believe in the guys, and it's a special team that brought you there. And it's going to revolve around the same guy for years, even if it's not next year. He will be around the team and he will affect the team and they will still play to his style in some regard. And because hope springs eternal, and you return back to that, and you pick your guys and you believe in your guys. And like any great protagonist, like truly great protagonist in any film, book, or whatever, a truly great man, a truly great woman is someone who is like loyal and does the right thing. And giving yourself to a cause is the right thing. Give yourself to the yesers, the pacers, and keep doing it over and over again. Because as I've said before in my rock tossing, rock skipping, little wending talks, we imbue meaning into the things that we watch. And with basketball, it imbues things back into you, as you can obviously see. Caitlin, in the piece that she wrote, which I read, which was phenomenal.
You read a basketball?
Exactly. Caitlin has derived meaning from basketball watching it. And Matthew, and listener and viewer, you have too. So that's why, I think.
Yeah, just my brief summary would be that I don't think the what ifs from that game 7 are ever going to completely go away.
Yeah.
But I think that there is going to be less ruminating about what went wrong and more reminiscing about what was arguably the best and most memorable run ever for the Pacers in NBA franchise history in the long run. So that's the thing that I hope people will hang on to eventually, even though this is extremely sad Jeff Teague right now. Like, it's fine to admit that. The next question, which I'm going to read their entirety of their question because I really like the way that he wrote this. Jeremy Lim. First, I want to say it's been a joy to watch the pod through this crazy playoff run. I loved listening to you and Samson really work through the game film, but also chop it up and talk about whatever. It was just so fun. You guys prove day in and day out that you can have basketball content that is supremely niche, extremely informative, and still fun. My question follows. I think it's interesting to hear how sports fans deal with losses. So my question is, as a fan, when faced with something as devastating as what happened in Game 7, what do you guys do to cope and move on from that? This doesn't feel like a shake it off moment. This is an all-timer, something that will haunt my brain space for as long as I have cognitive abilities. I think even the most reasonable and even-keeled fans last night must have hit like a train by what happened. This may be an all-time what if for me, and watching Tyrese in absolute physical and mental anguish in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, smashing his fist into the floor was unbearable. And oh, I'm so happy ESPN decided to show that 63 more times like it didn't hurt enough. Maybe I should go out and eat some ice pops to take my mind off of it.
Do you want me to go first?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So obviously I don't have the relationship with Tyrese that you have. I don't have but Indiana, and this will be in my piece that I end up writing for Basketball She Wrote, but Indiana was incredibly hospitable to me. And the reason why Tyrese is able to garner such, we met people, who had been transcribing some of the stuff we talk about and, presenting it to a Chinese audience, like a massive Chinese audience. That was largely because of Tyrese's popularity. And I met a fan that came all the way from Taiwan and was like, and I think you did as well. And Tyrese's reach is really far. And he's that big. And he was part of welcoming me to Indiana, and he's part of the Writers Guild Association voted him as like one of the best quotes because he gives himself. And TJ and everybody who talked about him afterwards, Pascal said Ty was the start of, starting to enjoy basketball again. He gives of himself repeatedly. So to watch someone like that have something taken away is extremely upsetting. And also, I think his clarity of the injury kind of made it. A lot of guys with that injury in the past have been like, ooh, maybe something feels off. But his was like, and maybe in an ode to his clarity to see things always on a basketball floor, he saw what and knew exactly what happened to himself. And it was just like, yeah, I don't know. It made Game 7 like really just like dull to watch the rest of it. I don't know under other circumstances if Andrew Nembhard hit a step back three to go up one at halftime in Game 7, I'd be over the roof, but over the moon, on top of the roof. And it wasn't there. And what made me feel better was I went and played basketball with my friends afterwards. Just went to the court, I was back in Saskatchewan, and I had my friends who I've known for over a decade. We've been playing basketball together for over a decade, and we just played basketball together, and it was awesome. And then that was about it. I talked to my grandma about it a little bit. She said, "Oh, that was just horrible." And I was like, "Yes, grandma." Agreed. But I went to basketball to get over basketball a little bit. That was my thing. Long answer.
I have a long story of me doing that as a very young version of Caitlin in a gym where there used to only be one light above a goal. I find playing basketball, even in an isolating state, which a lot of my relationship with basketball has been isolating, to be very clarifying a lot of times. I did not go do that the other night. I'm going to be honest with you, Jeremy. This sucks. It sucks immensely hard. What Tyrese wrote in there is what I wrote in the immediacy of me seeing the injury. Not good. Extremely sad, Jeff Teague. It feels like every time this franchise goes through a loss, it's never a normal loss. It's an extremely devastating loss that doesn't just affect that season, it could potentially affect the next one. That being said, most of the time we're told to stay in the present moment, and I think that's a healthy way to go about your life. But in this particular case, I'm going to choose to look at what led up to that game 7 and what they're going to do from here on out, because there are past times in Pacer history. It did not seem like the Pacers were going to have a very enthusiastic season after they had traded Paul George. And yet Victor Oladipo had the year that he had, and Domantas Sabonis getting moved from makeshift 4 into being a starting 5 blossomed into what he was. And that season was more than anybody ever could have hoped for it to be. There's potential for players on this roster to take steps forward in the absence of Tyrese in multiple different ways. And to be honest, it wasn't really a lot of fun a few seasons ago getting endless weeks, not months, updates about TJ Warren's foot situation. And that season felt incredibly purgatorial without a clear path to contention. And yet, after just 1.5 years of rebuilding, they were back in the Eastern Conference Finals and they progressed all the way to the finals. I don't think this has to be the end of this. I think the front office deserves the benefit of the doubt. I think the coaching staff deserves the benefit of the doubt. And for all we know, this could very well just be the beginning of something else that's incredible to cover and watch. And there's only going to be one champion every single year. You have to find other things to hold on to that you're going to remember as a fan that made that experience worthwhile. And I think that this team gave an immense amount of those moments to hang on to find memorable as a fan. So that's what I'm going to choose to do. That isn't necessarily something that took my mind off of it. I eat popsicles, but I eat popsicles every day. So that was just a part of my normal routine, Jeremy. Next question, Brian King. As much as people want to know what to expect in the future and what this team will look like moving forward, I want to ask, no matter how small or big, was there a moment this past year that stuck out to you the most for any particular reason, regular season or postseason included?
Okay, so you go first on that one.
So
Okay.
if you would have asked me this question a year ago, which I believe somebody did, and I think that my answer at the time was you and I had talked about the possession a couple times. It was just two-man game problem solving between Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Haliburton in the semifinals against the Knicks. And a point in which, it was just an empty pick and roll, and then Tyrese ended up setting an inverted short angled screen for him at the elbow, and he was screening his own man, and Siakam rejected it. And it was some stuff that we had talked about throughout the season. And now looking at the 2025 Pacers, it's almost the exact opposite. And that this is the possession that I'm probably most going to remember this team about, because it's the ingenuity of the coaching staff, but it's also the team first mentality of the 5 players who are on the court, in that they're running this set to try to get motion. And it was a read based off what Mitchell Robinson was going to do. We recapped this at the time of game 1 in overtime, but the Pacers are literally clinging to a 1-point lead with less than 20 seconds to play. And the play finishes with Pascal and Tyrese on the logo and ends in a dunk for Obi Toppin. Like, I can't think of any teams in the past that I've covered with the Pacers where you would have seen their 2-star players effectively being used as a decoy to open up room for a 3-on-3 after Aaron Nesmith had gone supernova and the regulation time to get them to having a 3-point lead with less than 15 seconds to go. Like, just the overall team first mentality of a team that played like a team, that's probably what's going to stick out in my head the most. And that's not a super strategic answer. That's not a super technical answer, but that play style is how I'm going to remember this basketball team.
Yeah. For me, it's not as much about structure. It's more so about my constant whinging that lasted for quite some time about Tyrese Haliburton's proclivities as a driver, and it was the drive on Giannis probably because at the start of that game, the offensive process was so frustrating. And I thought that in the Eastern Conference Finals run and a sweep, I guess, they lost 7 less games in the playoffs that year. I thought that the Pacers were a counterpunch team still, but far less counterpunchy. And part of that revolved around Tyrese's lack of range, I think, in what he wanted to do when things went a little bit haywire. And this season, we talked about counters that came because of what's happened to him in the past, and there will be counters that come in the future because he's an incredibly cerebral and wonderful player. But it was the fact that he was constantly adding to his game, showing to his game, and doing it when things got toughest. I know he didn't have his biggest series, but that Thunder team was really meant to prey on all of the things that aren't the strengths in his game, and they were meant to take away everything that he does incredibly well. And he busted his ass repeatedly. He worked so hard. He was inventive, and it started in round 1 when he broke the seal and got to the bucket, and it was like, man, we might have something here. And he just kept upping the ante. And I think that drive was emblematic of so much that happened with Tyrese. And as I said, I don't know how many podcast episodes ago, he really, really made me a fan of his game because I learned from you into some of the unseen advantages that he's able to, bestow upon his teammates, but also some of the things he just took for himself. I thought that was a wonderful play and drive, and he was able to bring so much. So that was it for me. Truly the creamsicle of players in the NBA.
And I like that these are polar opposite responses. Tyrese
Mm-hmm.
doing everything versus Tyrese doing virtually nothing. Eric B., who do you think is poised to take the biggest step forward next season in Tyrese's absence? Quentin Jackson, Jarris Walker, Benedict Mathurin? Feel free to pick another name as well if you would like.
Well, we have questions about Drew, like Nembhard, so I'll leave that there. We'll talk about Andrew Nembhard, like no doubt about it. There's other questions, and he's obviously going to be, a really big part of how we discuss the team going forward. But I'll choose Jarris Walker. He was, of course, there was stuff to like in his rookie season, but he was really far away, per my eye. He was so far away. And in year 2, it wasn't the huge step that people thought, but I thought it was a pretty big one because there is this constant thing. It's why, I asked Darko, because I've observed Darko with the now recently traded Desmond Bane. They've always had a close relationship. And I remember asking him a question about Desmond, and he said he's the most talented player he's ever coached. And Darko has coached a lot of really great players. And he said it's because Desmond has a unique ability to translate what he learned that day and put it on an NBA court later that night, which is a really special thing. I think Kyrie has talked about that as well, about how many reps you are away from making the jump. And Jarris, I think, has taken such a high percentage of the leap he's going to have next year, I think happened this year. I think he will make that leap into big positive defender. I think that the shot will still be there. And I think that he'll start to make more plays in space and hopefully lose some of the kind of, there goes the ball to his game. That, like sometimes it's like maybe that presence of mind and like, what, this possession matters a lot. That, the point guard
more motor, less tiptoeing.
Sure. Now, I don't know if he can change the biomechanics of how he operates. However, he can certainly implement his skill, of which I think there's quite a lot. And I don't exactly know what the Pacers are going to look like next year and what they're going to try to be doing. But I think Jarris can be a very big part of that. I would expect a big year from Jarris Walker.
The thing about Jarris is after we did the woe versus woe pod following the bench win over the Timberwolves, he had a very rough end to that fourth quarter and overtime. And from then on out, it was kind of like he turned a corner from there and there was little memorable flashes, glimpses where it became somewhat apparent to me that like, hey, they might actually be able to get away with him playing like 10% of the possessions against Giannis to help Pascal. And there might be other little spots where like he's going to make more sense than Ben Shepherd in certain cases. And like even just seeing him late in the series against New York, switching out to Jalen Brunson a few times in stack actions when he got switched onto the ball, it was like, you're showing me something here.
Yeah.
In ways that, like you said, that I wasn't readily seeing at times when he was a rookie and things that he needed to learn and grow into doing. So the one thing that benefits Jarris is I don't think that the style of the Pacers is going to change dramatically just because Tyrese isn't playing. I think they're still going to rely on their depth, but they're just going to have one less rotation player, which means you're not going to be having to make
one less rotation player is quite a sentence.
Well, for Jarris, it's somewhat meaningful because you're not going to
Yeah.
be making a nightly choice between him and Ben Shepherd anymore. You're not going to necessarily have to. Of course, Johnny Furphy might have something to say about this. We shall see at Summer League, but that's another person Pacer fans will know. People outside of the Pacer fandom, keep an eye on what Johnny Furphy does at Summer League.
Let me say something. Pacers fans, I will be at Summer League, and I'll be keeping an eye on your fellas. I'll be tapped in.
My answer to this question is actually going to be Benedict Mathurin, in part because, strangely enough, he and Tyrese haven't fit all that well together through the first 3 seasons of Ben's career. Right now, in their totality of their minutes, I think that they're very slightly positive. So they're not overwhelmingly winning minutes when Ben and Tyrese have been on the floor together. And in part, it's because of things that we talked about in the past. Mathurin, in a lot of respects, plays better as a sixth man off the bench because you can call more plays for him. It requires less reads. Tyrese wants to play random. The starting lineup plays a lot of pace after. Ben still is trying to find his way and adapting to that. If Tyrese isn't out there and Ben's starting, there might be more incentive to you to lean into running a few more set plays and actions for Ben with the starting lineup. And also, like, this isn't something that I like to talk about a lot, but he is entering a contract year. So there's extra motivation for him to succeed in a starting role, which I expect him to likely have, depending upon what other changes they make with the roster. And I also think, which is something that we'll touch on with Nembhard, that there might even be room more so for him on the defensive end, because I think it's entirely possible that you might see Mathurin taking on more top assignments next year because of everything that's going to be asked of Andrew Nembhard. So my lean here is Mathurin for all of those reasons, because he doesn't, to this point, hasn't necessarily meshed that well with Tyrese. There might be some tweaks in his favor without Tyrese out on the floor. There might be room for him to grow on both ends of the floor. So that's probably who I will keep an eye on, although I do think that there's room for Jarris to certainly be a more consistent fixture of the rotation than what we've seen in the first 2 seasons. And Andrew Nembhard's somebody that we're going to talk about for several questions here.
2 questions, quick. So at the end of it, 1, was the bench whoa or whoa is what I would like you to answer. And then 2, does a big year for Ben mean 20 points per game?
If this team's going to remain competitive, I think it absolutely has to. And then it is a question of to what degree that will change the offense. Because at the beginning of the year, when Tyrese was limited, the Pacers were playing more like a Benedict Mathurin team than they were playing like a Tyrese Haliburton team. And that was something that they had to adapt to, and they had to find separate hybrid lineups pairing with both Tyrese and Pascal that fit both of those 2 types of play styles. So it is something to keep an eye on. As far as the woe versus woe, TJ found it at the end of the season against OKC over the last several games, especially after, I didn't necessarily bemoan him, but I was like, there are excesses of TJ ball going on right now. Like Pascal's being guarded by Shea and Isaiah Joe, and I'm watching TJ Thomas Bryant pick and roll against Chet and Caruso. But TJ's ability to hang on to the ball longer was a pretty good counter for the way that OKC, as I referred to them many times, was like oscillating fan arms in the passing lanes. So TJ found it. Obi found it off and on at points, although it was pretty heartbreaking to listen to him after Game 7 be like, I feel like I played bad, that I let the team down. Like I was just thinking so much about Tyrese that it was hard to focus on what we needed to be doing. I think that there were times where it was WHOA in the playoffs, and there were times where it was, that word taking on both meanings. I think it was less WOE, but I don't think it was to the same level that it was a year ago, I guess is the way that I would see it.
I was going to say, is there, being so close to the team, you're always going to nitpick coverage. I thought the bench stuff was overstated by like big media. I was like, starters there's a lot here. That's how I felt. But
Because it wasn't as big of an advantage in the Knicks series. Like, honestly, like when the Knicks started playing deeper, it was like the Pacers' depth isn't necessarily an advantage when they play like this. But by the end of the OKC series, it had taken, and some of that's matchup related too. But next question, Andy Huntsucker. I guess I got to ask what next year is going to look like. I worry the team will blow it up, which I think is a mistake. But assuming the team is largely intact and the core, Siakam, Nembhard, Nesmith, Turner, all return, what happens? Do you think Carlisle builds a new offense around Nembhard as the primary ball handler, or just makes small adjustments?
Let me also say quickly, the Pacers were not expecting Tyrese's situation and did not trade their draft pick because of that. That is so asinine to suggest, just as a mention.
Was there people suggest?
Yes, it's absolutely asinine to suggest that.
No, I don't think that's the reason. It's
They didn't
fortuitous that they
love
did it, but I don't think that's the reason.
Yes, they didn't love the draft, obviously. It happens. Not everyone loves the draft. 2013, there's like 3 guys, 30 picks. Tough sledding. Sometimes drafts aren't all they're chalked up to be. Yeah. Anyway, but does the team, what does it look like? I think it looks largely the same. It would depress me a little bit if the Pacers went the way of like the Celtics or the Jazz, and it's like zero sum. You know what? There's nothing to gain here. Toss it away. Like the Celtics are selling everyone, it appears, which is okay, all right, but like wow. The Pacers are a team that usually like they don't sign their draft picks back that often. They've built teams out of trades. They clearly have a great eye for when players might have more to give. Maybe there's a trade like that that's on the horizon. Maybe they see a guard that fits well next year and then into next to Tyrese in the future, not a Nembhard spot, but just somewhere in that backcourt, maybe. But I think that it probably is like you're looking at a lot of Ben Mathurin, you're looking at a lot of Nembhard, you're looking at more of Pascal driving the ball, you're looking at all this kind of stuff, and I've said this not on the podcast, and I didn't want to say it during the finals run, but I've been saying it for some time. Is that a pivot that I think makes the most sense? God, people will probably be upset with me. A pivot that makes a lot of sense for the Pacers is searching for what the center spot looks like going into the future. I don't know. I'm so sorry. That's a pivot that's really important to hit, and I wonder about that. But I think it largely will look the same. Similar anyway.
If you follow along with the outline, there is going to be a question about Myles Turner coming up in the not too distant future. This particular question about whether they'll build an entirely new offense around Nembhard as the primary ball handler or just make small adjustments. I think the thing that stands out here to me is that I think that Nembhard has a reputation of being a change of pace guard. And in some respects, obviously all 3-point guards for the Pacers play very differently. As we just talked about, TJ holds onto the ball for as long as possible and plays like a maelstrom. Tyrese gets off the ball very quickly, and Andrew is somewhere in between the two of them. And he is very comfortable playing in the mid-range. That being said, the Pacers have a faster average time to first action and a faster average time to cross half court with Nembhard as the bring-up ball handler than with either Tyrese or TJ. Now, some of that is in part because of how defenses key in on both of them because they know what style both of them want to play. It's because Tyrese is being face guarded. Therefore, when you give it to Nembhard as an outlet, he's not facing that type of pressure. Still, that being said, I think that the Pacers are pretty comfortable with him running point in this style. Case in point, this action was run in every series of this playoff run. Tyrese, as you will notice, is in the corner with his hands on his knees, being face guarded. Andrew Nembhard as running point. Nembhard comes off, or Nesmith comes off the stagger, flips it back to Nembhard. Then it becomes veer action between Myles Turner and Nesmith. If they don't get anything there, then Nesmith goes behind kind of an exit screen eventually from Pascal Siakam. Wide open 3 for him. They ran this in the Cavs series. And just to remind everybody, Andrew Nembhard was the starting point guard for the Indiana Pacers against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He ran far more pick and roll in that particular series because of how Okoro and Max Strus were guarding Tyrese and because of the advantages of Nembhard being guarded by smaller weaker defenders because of what the Cavs starting lineup was. This is that same play again, and the Pacers are going to get through 4 different actions by my count here, where Myles ends up setting that as a seal for the cross court to Obi. There's still 9 seconds left on the shot clock when they're stacking action on top of action, and that's with Nembhard playing point. Of course, the difference being is it's also with Tyrese holding the Oklahoma City Thunder, whether that was Lou Dort, whether that was a Okoro there, whether it's a Okoro at the logo here, where Nembhard's being able to navigate this completely 4-on-4. He's benefiting from a lot of Tyrese's gravity here. So the bigger question to me doesn't even necessarily have to do with the pace of play. It has to do with, similarly to what happened to Tyrese when suddenly Buddy wasn't there anymore and Tyrese had to make adjustments to how he played because that lack of gravity at the nail was no longer there. What does it mean for Nembhard when he's running point and the best movement shooter on the team and the guy who draws the most defensive attention is no longer on the court? Because we saw somewhat what happened against the Knicks when they put OG Anunoby onto Nembhard and he was drawing the toughest defensive assignment and they were ducking under. And I've seen this against other matchups as well. So like in my head, that's kind of where things are going to me, is that we haven't necessarily seen Andrew Nembhard over a sustained period of time. We did see it in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, being the person running point with the most defensive attention on him while he's also trying to do what he does at the other end of the floor. So for people who don't know or don't remember, Rick Carlisle's playbook isn't completely different with Tyrese Haliburton at point than it was with Luka Doncic at point in Dallas. Certainly, they aim to play faster. They stack actions more. It's less heliocentric, but they run a lot of the exact same plays. Like, I documented this when they played in Summer League. I was like, here's a play that they used to run with Luka and Jalen Brunson, and now it's here it is with Tyrese and Nembhard, or here it is with these guys. So, like, there's a lot of carryover.
Oh, I thought you were leaning into like a Nembhard Brunson thing. I was like, oh,
Those comparisons have been made.
they have been made. The Brunson leap is so like that's just stratospheric. But if you had asked me 2 years ago, like pick a young guard that is underrated, I would have said Nembhard. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have said Nembhard. You ask me right now, I'll say Nembhard. So there's room for him, certainly.
This question goes right along with that same line of thinking. Jack Humphrey, I'm aware this is incredibly early to be asking this, but do you think the Pacers will have Nembhard take over point guard duties for next year, or do you think they will try to bring in someone else?
I think it's Nembhard's job. And I'd be really surprised because like Tyrese's injury is one thing, and then the fallout of it looks a lot of different ways. But 2 players, as you said before, with one less rotation player, like all the players love Tyrese. That's not what this is about. But the reality is, like, Andrew has an opportunity to get more of the ball and prove himself, and I'm sure we'll be extremely happy to play next to Tyrese once Tyrese is back. I think I want to see those guys play together for like a decade. I think they fit so well. But Andrew getting a shot at lead guard duties on a lot of other teams would be given. And the Pacers have an opportunity here to give that in a run of play where it's like Tyrese won't be there. So they get to take a look at things. And I'd be disappointed a little bit unless there was some home run crazy guard who comes in. I think there's an opportunity. And I think that in what will certainly be a down year relative to this year, and losing Tyrese for any stretch of time is a disappointment, certainly, there's an opportunity here for the Pacers to learn about Andrew Nembhard and the full bandwidth of what he can do with the ball in his hands. Even if that answer is an abrupt no on many things, at least you figure it out, and it gives Andrew something to go to the drawing board with. Can I also say, listeners, if anything comes across odd, there's been internet problems, okay?
I also expect them to start Nembhard at point guard. And that is the position where he's had many of his most standout games, if we're looking back at his time since he was a rookie. But my head does go back to the 2-game miniseries against Atlanta, as well as Game 6 of the NBA Finals. Because for the second season in a row, the Pacers have had the highest average pickup distance in Second Spectrum's entire database, 12 years. And that starts with Andrew Nembhard. He sets the tone on that end of the floor. And as we saw at the end of the NBA Finals, he seemed pretty fatigued being able to initiate offense when Tyrese was virtually acting as a decoy. Now, every game of the regular season next year is not going to be the NBA Finals against the Oklahoma City Thunder defense. However, I will once again chance throwing clips up onto the screen that when they were in Atlanta and he's being defended by Dyson Daniels on one end of the floor when Tyrese did not even play, and he's having to guard Trae Young at the other end of the floor, you can see Dyson's going under an entire double drag against Nembhard. Nembhard still does need to tighten up his handle a little bit, especially against ice coverage and going to his right. You could see throughout that game. And then when he was guarding Trae Young, something that showed up when he's the on-ball defender and something that Benedict Mathurin's going to have to work on as a starter, the tagging against Trae Young's creativity as a passer wasn't exactly what you want it to be. So by the end of that game, they took Nembhard off of Trae Young and put Ben onto Trae Young, and then they decided to switch the screening actions between Trae and George Niang outright with Pascal and put Nembhard off ball. And in part, that's because Nembhard and Siakam are their two best off ball defenders. By putting Ben on Trae Young, they gained Nembhard as a tagger and what his off ball feel is. But it was also because the workload was just too much to ask. So I'll throw this back to you because I was genuinely trying to think of this. How many point guards in the NBA do you know of who are doing the primary initiating for their team while also guarding the other team's best perimeter player every game and picking up at an average of 50 feet defensively?
The list is Andrew Nembhard.
It's a very short list. And
Yeah.
that's what he's going to be asked to do on a nightly basis next season, which when Jack asked this question, it makes me think maybe they would want to bring in. I mean, at the bare minimum, they're going to have 3-point guards because, like they want to have 3 centers. I think Rick really values having 3-point guards. They like being able to play 2-point guards at once a lot of the time. That's why most of the time it was Tyrese starts with Nembhard. Tyrese finishes the first quarter with TJ. Nembhard comes back in a little bit later. They close halves with Tyrese and Nembhard. Tyrese did not play a lot of minutes without another point guard out there. I think that they're going to still want to keep doing that, even if Nembhard is the starter. So I kind of do expect that they will add someone else
Yeah.
via some means.
But not.
And I wonder if Nemhel gets a little less warm, Samson. I really wonder what the impact defensively is going to be on Andrew Nembhard, asking him to do this level of work on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, it's his defense is gonna drop off. But to your point about adding somebody, he's the point guard. Ben is the 2.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's like. Trey Jones could be pretty interesting, although he doesn't shoot the ball very well. I think Trey Jones does a lot of things that the Pacers like. He could be a guard off the bench, but yeah, Nemhel is gonna. That's an interesting thing too, because that happens in careers. Like once a player gets elevated to a certain role in offense, the defense kind of falls off for like 4 years. And then maybe when it gets back, everything gets allocated again or all that kind of stuff. Then it comes back because it's like, now I'm 29 and I'm rededicating myself. It's like, the narrative structure of NBA careers, the Wiggins of it all. Yeah. I think Nemhel, it's not going to be the same.
Things might be a little bit more Nem easy. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. This is the big question, Samson. Gregory Roach, if you can please share your thoughts about re-signing Myles Turner in light of his struggles in the Eastern Conference and NBA Finals, please. And before you answer it, I will say that I don't know if you know, but Rick Carlisle did do his weekly radio spot yesterday, and he said that re-signing Myles Turner is the organization's top priority, although he would not go into contract details. And for people who might want to know just statistically, Myles was at 10 points, 37, 21, 75 shooting in the finals, 4.4 rebounds, more turnovers than assists. Over the Eastern Conference Finals and the finals, he finished with 26 turnovers and 13 made threes. So he had twice as many turnovers as a center as he had made threes in those 2 series. And for additional context, it was revealed by Rick during the finals that he was sick at some point in time. And I don't know what type of sick or how much that continued to linger and bother him, but the numbers also were not great in the series against the New York Knicks either. So with those things being said, your thoughts?
Yeah. This is 2 postseasons in a row where, we don't do like low light watching often, but Myles has been a weak link like quite a few times, and we didn't get that many opportunities to praise him, I don't think. And not because we're withholding it, but I just didn't think that the performances were that good. The really interesting thing with Myles is just the structure of his archetype versus the impact of, how he fills it out. And as things got into the nitty-gritty, it was tough. And I have long wondered about that position. And I'm coming from outside the market, and Myles, my apologies, man, but I do wonder what the center position looks like going into the future. I was pretty surprised, and again, it's Shams, so I don't know, but like on game one, they're looking at 30 million per or whatever, right? So for me, a player is worth whatever they have the leverage to negotiate. I think that's an old Jalen Rose quote from when he was on Jalen and Jacoby. Um, Players deserve money. Go get it, Myles, if you can. But the Pacers, from their perspective, I think this one has really big implications going forward, like really big. During the regular season, I think the structure of Myles is going to be perfectly fine. But as this team continues, hopefully in years going forward, heading into the, out of the frying pan into the fire of the playoffs, a different center might be something helpful. But I can also just be a jackass from outside the market saying, because how many years has that been happening where someone from outside of Indiana is like, they got to trade Myles? I mean, this is year 10 of it. So I'm glad I'm the guy.
The thing about Myles is I'm of the opinion over what I've seen from the last 2 years, and especially, in this interim when Tyrese's pull-up shooting isn't going to be available and Tyrese's off-ball gravity isn't going to be available, that this offense makes the most sense with a 5 who can at least be positioned in the strong
Yeah.
side corner and other places on the floor. That's why I liked Jalen Smith. That's why I liked the addition of Thomas Bryant. I like that they can shape shift and take different forms and play inverted and put guards in the dunker. And in some respects, that might be even more important if Andrew Nembhard is your starting point guard, depending upon how his pull-up shooting shakes out post playoffs. That being said, it is exactly what you just said, in that my enduring memory of the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago was the very last possession when he got switched onto Jason Tatum and Aaron Nesmith was like 9-1-1. Myles is switched onto Jason Tatum, switch to blitz, the shot goes up, and then they're outnumbered on the glass because Myles has switched out. And while there are many valuable things that Myles Turner does, the rebounding is still a very real one. And when you're playing a final series against a Thunder team that forces turnovers like none other, you have to make up the saying, the basketball is the most important part of basketball. You can't also be getting beat on the glass as well. And he's certainly a contributing factor of that. And last year it was he's being cross-matched and guarded by Jason Tatum, and he doesn't really know where to insert himself. And there's some autopilot post moves against Derek White, and you can't really switch with him. And this year it was like what our preview was turned out to be right. Like if Oklahoma City ended a possession with him getting switched or pushed into 3 to 10 feet against a switch, they likely felt pretty good about it. And while I do think he had some very impressive defensive possessions against Chet Holmgren, which we did talk about to an extent, and I do think that his defense generally trended upward over the back half
Yep.
of the season versus what we had seen over roughly the year and a half prior to that. I do have some question marks, and I had the same questions last year after the Eastern Conference Finals. I will admit that heading into the trade deadline, I was staunchly on the other side of things and being like, you don't have an answer, and Thomas Bryant isn't a starting center, and your team is playing the best basketball that it has played. And I don't know how long, so you just got to let this ride. As it turns out now, they would be getting nothing in exchange for him because he would just be walking and leaving if that's what decision they made, which would look not great. Also, like something they have to balance with the fan base is that Tyrese just went down is going to be gone, and Myles is the franchise fixture. He's been here. This will be his 11th season. It's something to consider, but also, and I don't want this to sound harsh with what I'm about ready to say, but the fact that Tyrese likely is not going to play next season almost opens a window for you to be like, you know what? We could do something cheaper at the center position for a year even if that just means seeing what Isaiah Jackson can do post Achilles and what Thomas Bryant does or whoever else that you could find there, do it for a year. You do have your draft pick back, and then answer the center position after that, because maybe there is a more complete answer for things that through 4 different coaching staffs Myles has yet to provide. And it's not because, like, I felt something when Myles Turner was saying Indiana and that he went to the NBA Finals with the same franchise. Like, I'm not numb inside, but I'm also being like, when they get deeper into the postseason against opponents like a Boston and an OKC, it was tough. And even against New York, you and I talked about it. It was very up and down. There were times where it was like, and then it was like, no.
Well, that's
So I can't say that it would necessarily be my top priority, especially because the other thing that you have to consider is when this looked like an NBA Finals team, and I'm not here to save ownership money. I don't want people to get that opinion, but they might have been more willing to go into the luxury tax when this was a team that just went to the NBA Finals and Tyrese is coming back. Are you willing to? And does re-signing Myles mean that you're losing other players? Like, I'm a little bit more on the fence.
it's the Pacers did the most incredible thing. They became an NBA Finals team. They took a historic team to 7 games, and of course, the Thunder won. But we all would have loved to see Tyrese have his game after 9 points in 7 minutes. We all would have liked to see both those incredible teams go bash around with each other until the final possession. The Pacers were damn good, but when you're damn good and when you're on the precipice of something, then you start looking at where the limitations are. I cover a team that had to do it in DeMar DeRozan, who it wasn't. Now it's Kyle Lowry, but DeMar was far more popular than Lowry. DeMar was the most popular player since Vince Carter, and they traded him. And they traded Terrence Ross. Like, the Raptors traded fan favorites, long tenured players, because they were like, we need a little bit more. And the Pacers, yes, it's fun to get to that point, but now you gotta start snipping. Trey Mann is celebrating for the Thunder because he was so close with that group, so close, and they traded him. He's gone. Josh Giddey gone. Players gone. So many players on the Thunder that were part of the Brotherhood gone. The reality is you gotta make things shake sometimes. I do wonder what happens, but also maybe there's room for, it could just be simple to try and exist somewhere around the back end of the playoffs if you can have Myles there, and maybe honestly they give him a descending contract or something for when Tyrese comes back into the fold. I mean, they did that before, right? Like, they give him the big money, went big, and then it came back down. So, I mean, Fred VanVleet just signed with the Rockets today at $25 million per, which is a steal for him. Guys, yeah, we'll see.
Really quick, a basketball thing that will be interesting to watch, assuming Myles does remain on the roster. No one on the Pacers took more threes from the top of the key than Myles Turner. 259 attempts from the top of the key, threes. When Tyrese was off the floor, he shot 22% on those attempts and only attempted 35 threes from the top of the key when Tyrese was not on the floor. When Tyrese is on the floor, he shoots 40% on top of the key threes, and he attempted 244 of those. So this summer, I'm going to want to delve into why exactly is Myles Turner not getting the threes from his best shooting spot when Tyrese doesn't play. And obviously, you can't completely control for what the shooting percentage is, but why is he getting likely so much more high quality ones out of the pick and pop, and probably not even just the pick and pop, because I'm guessing a lot of those are probably trailer threes where Tyrese is pitching them back to him at the top of the key, but those shots completely disappear when Tyrese doesn't play. So
I'll pitch something and you get back to me when you go look at it. The would-be closeout from the weak side to Turner is farther away typically when Tyrese is on ball because he's so good at picking out the opposite corner. That affects running Turner off the line. That's a big motivator, I would guess.
And Tyrese is a lot better at stringing out the help. Like when you watch him play against Milwaukee and they're putting 2 on the ball, he's very comfortable dribbling east-west and dragging drop bigs further away from Myles than what else is the case. But those shots definitely disappear. So something to consider. Although obviously if you resign Myles, you'd be doing it with the knowledge that eventually he would be playing with Tyrese again. But next question, KHS, are there any playoff observations for you and Samson that you think would impact the play style of the league in the future?
Yeah, I think it's the rules of engagement. So there was a lot of like complaining and critiquing of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander because like how players defended his driving angles. And when Nembhard was in there, we got far less of those calls. Like they decreased immeasurably. But Andrew, when they were going, like when they're body to body and Shea is playing in post up or spinning or bully drive, very handsy. Like they let both these teams, and I know Pacers fans obviously were like, they let Thunder do this, and they only let us do X and Y. I understand, but the Thunder, what they did was they went to the rules of engagement that had not been legislated yet, because for so many years refs have been keeping such a close eye on like driving angles, the hand on the hip shove, like changing all that kind of stuff. They police it very closely. But what the Thunder did was they bodied guys on catches and dead balls and all that kind of stuff, and they played extremely rough off ball and were like, NBA defense hasn't really been bullying in these areas. So let's go bully in those areas and see if it gets called. And what we got was like they scored 101 points in the like game 7. The Thunder played a bunch of low scoring games, really low scoring. Like the Pacers were used to them scoring how much, and in the finals we saw not that much. And yeah, this is great analysis from me, by the way. There's lots. Now it's a little. Anyway, the Thunder, they were aggressive and ramped everything up on the margins. And I think that's going to be fair game for many other teams. And I think that the NBA as a whole will get extremely physical in those trenches. And I think that's going to affect many things. And I think it'll take a couple of years for the refs or the league to respond to it if they do. And I think the lasting impact of this finals run or this playoffs will be the bastard ball that the Thunder play, where they're just like, I'm such a bastard, I'm gonna bully and beat you wherever I can. And if the refs call it, they call it. That'll show up on a bunch of different teams, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because a year ago, like I said, the Pacers had the highest average pickup distance in Synergy's database in terms of just total volumes of press and the pickup point and second spectrums as well. And when the regular season came around, this past regular season for the NBA at large was the highest average pickup point in the 12-year database. So that was something that carried over from the playoffs to the regular season and once again in this playoffs. And certainly that's increased the value of players like Nembhard, like Drew Holiday, like Derek White, although Drew Holiday just got traded to Portland. But, Tamani Kamara, Asar Thompson,
Ooh.
those types of guys. And it does bring to question whether if that continues to the extent that it did, although the Pacers did win a key game 6 because they dialed that pressure back, does the sixth man bucket getter become more valuable as a response to that pressure? Like the type of player like a TJ McConnell who can stay on the ball longer and find their own shot off of the bench. I think that that's a potential counter punch in response to the way that teams are guarding. I generally will say that I don't really believe in the grand theory of basketball. Like I'm guessing that there will probably be some teams that are going to look at how the Thunder forced so many turnovers and they're going to see like the team that committed fewer turnovers in the playoffs won the game X amount of times. You don't have the Thunder's personnel to be doing that. You're going to be reverse engineering yourself to it. Now, might you try different techniques for how you would bridge the possession war? Maybe you want to find ways to get more offensive rebounds, perhaps, but I don't think that you can just be like, well, we need to
You're
hit
hurting
that
my feelings
number.
right now. I
And that's
covered
going
the
to
team that did the reverse engineering despite personnel. It was pain.
exactly. And like the Thunder do not play the way that the Boston Celtics play, and the Celtics do not play the way that the Denver Nuggets play, and the Denver Nuggets do not play the way that the Milwaukee Bucks played, and the Bucks don't play the way that the Lakers played. So like the
One
idea
more,
that
one more. Include that.
yeah, they don't play like they did either. Like all these teams instead really found like loopholes or things that made them special and they maximize them to the extent that they can. If there's a grand theory of basketball, that's the one that I more so believe in. Now, it's possible
Mhm.
that people might also look at the Pacers and be from a team building standpoint, which is something that you and I talked about many times, is that maybe you're entering the era of it was rarely about the Pacers having the stronger link than their opponent. It was about them having fewer weak links, and depth matters more, especially to be able to play this type of style if teams are going to be applying more pressure and be doing what you said defensively. If I was going to pick like one little tweak, it's just about the playoffs at large and not even necessarily just the Pacers and the Thunder, it would be that I really do think that there's going to be an ongoing growth of hybrid zone and teams floating in and out of man versus zone, because the more you spread the game out, the more that you have to defend space and not necessarily just players. And there were so many teams this year that I saw like, we're going to trigger zone after one or two passes, or we're going to show a 1-3-1 and then we're going to drop into a 2-3, or on a high post splash we're going to go man, like just trying to find any advantage they can at the defensive end. And I expect that to continue to grow. I do think that this was the highest frequency of zone in the playoffs in Second Spectrum's 12-year database as well. So I think that that will continue. But generally speaking, I don't think, nor do I think it should, that the finals should necessarily be informing the way that other teams play. That's generally where I land.
Yeah. Well, it's not sweep. It doesn't have to be sweeping, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
what you said, like there could be more zone. What I said, like there are some parts of the game that haven't yet been legislated for referees that you can take advantage. This usually teams take advantage for a couple years, then we see refs tune in. And also if you pay attention to the Pacers and you're like, it didn't end up being that Neesmith was an incredible, like, you know what? I can take guys off the dribble. Myles didn't punish as much down the stretch. It really did come down to, like, a lot of it was just Nembhard and Siakam and Tyrese are all better than people thought. And they got a diverse range of creation. And also TJ McConnell was hot at the right time. Ben got hot at the right time a couple times. But you can't, like, okay, go build that if you can. I don't know. see what happens.
I guess from like shot distribution standpoint, there might be something to take away from the Pacers and the Thunder in that while the Pacers were shooting lights out from three and had, at one point in time, Neesmith, Nembhard, and Myles Turner had the top three effective field goal percentages in the playoffs on a certain volume of threes. The Pacers also showed in the finals, as well did Shea, obviously throughout the entire run and his entire MVP campaign, that while analytics is not the mid-range and vice versa, there was quite a bit of value to having players who can compete in the mid-range when shot charts get warped in the playoffs, and the value of pull-up shooting overall in that regard. Like, that's something that the Pacers weren't the number one team in the NBA in terms of threes and rim attempts. They were pretty far from that. So were the Thunder. So having guys who can exist in that space, people might continue to take that as a lesson, although I think that's kind of already been there.
Yeah. It's the irony of it, right? Is that so many players, you're so comfortable. Like we just talked about, oh, well, Myles gets middle and then what? You know? But if you have a guy who's like a killer from there, that is the one point on the floor that defenses don't know how to effectively manage and take away and keep from being dangerous. It's why TJ McConnell can step into games and just be like, I'm scary. Like, you don't know, like, I'm comfortable here. So now what? And you're actually scared of my presence here. And the mid-range craft, as long as you're not like addicted to it, and Shea isn't addicted to it at all. That's the difference.
You mean you're not Monte Ellis taking a pull-up two in the first 5 seconds of the shot clock?
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a different. It is a means of control, and then a means of dominance. And I watched Shea do it. Like the Team Canada beat Team USA. It wasn't the big team, but they beat them at the FIBA World Cup because Shea was the player on the floor who could get middle and control and and be good there. And they also got a whole bunch of threes from Dylan Brooks, which obviously didn't happen again. But it was meaningful. And Anthony Edwards, if he ever makes the big leap that people want him to make, it will be because he finds control in the middle of the floor. Luka Doncic was able to vex and do better than this Thunder team in the past because he just sat middle and was like, I bet this is super frustrating for you guys because you can't change what I want to do here. The middle, if you can get it and dominate it, and maybe a 29-year-old Tyrese Haliburton will, floater time will really be masterful there. It's just the middle is so good. It's why they teach point guards to play off a two. It's like, it's not the exact same. It's harkening back to that. I've talked to, Tom Thibodeau, Eric Spoelstra, Steve. I've talked to so many coaches about controlling the middle of the floor, and they're like, I don't know how to coach it or teach it. Some guys just have it. And yeah, it's the mid-range helps you there, but it's a special place.
Okay, we've reached the end of the basketball specific questions. Now there's going to be a lot of Samson specific questions.
Oh, Lord.
Trent French, I really appreciate your writing in the podcast with Samson during the playoffs. Can we expect a full-time podcast from you two in the future, or is this only for the playoffs? Take it away, Samson.
I had a tweet. Wait, I'll go read my tweet to find the perfect. Yeah, as if it was the perfect language, Samson. Sure. What did I say? Okay, it's right. Oh, I said, by the way, if someone wants to pay myself and Caitlin a good amount of money to talk about the NBA, we're open to that. Agreed? We're open to that? I think that's the will is there from both of us. Like if there was an opportunity to make money talking to Caitlin about basketball, I'm there. No questions asked. So that's yes, there's what's the question exactly? Is there, can we expect? God, I don't know. Full time, we gave what, like once a month almost in the regular season? I don't know. It's on Caitlin. She can answer this question.
First and foremost, hopefully I'm not going out on a limb here, but I think we both enjoy doing this. I think that we found an audience that enjoyed having us do it. Samson has a job covering the Toronto Raptors. Obviously, this is still a job for both of us. So we'll have to see to the level that we can do it during the regular season. But to remind everyone, we did do it during the regular season. We did do this once a month during the regular season, prepping everyone that we would do it again in the playoffs. Of course, the circumstances have somewhat changed. I've enjoyed the fact that the team that Samson covers, while I don't wish bad things on anyone, has been a bad team because it's made him available to cover the team that I cover with me. And in the past, I had been going and collaborating with him about the team that he covers. Now, it's entirely possible next year. I'm not making any predictions here, but the Raptors might be as good or better than the Pacers. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So that will certainly impact what we're doing next year. So I guess it will be to be determined. It wouldn't be because there was some podcast beef or because Samson and I didn't like doing it. It would be because I guess life circumstances, job circumstances perhaps might dictate otherwise, but
Can I
yeah.
Can I make a plea quick? So there were a lot of people who commented like, I had no idea this podcast existed. How have I been missing this whole time? Like we had an okay audience, I think a really strong audience for Indiana on the first playoff run.
Mm.
And then I think we had kind of an exorbitant and outrageous audience relative to Indiana for this playoff run. We had a huge audience for this podcast. And the thing that makes it more tenable going forward is for, Trent, everyone else, that just keep watching. When we have an episode, watch it. And even if the Pacers aren't as exciting, or even if whatever we're talking about isn't as exciting as like finals coverage, keep watching, because we were in the field of view of the NBA media, and everyone talked to us, and like all your favorite writers and all your favorite talkers, whatever, said how much they loved our podcast. Yes, but we're not going to be in the field of view forever. And as someone who's covered a finals team and a team that went from really like the best team in the league to wow, interesting underdog to bad and then good, it's like people care when your team is good. And that goes for industry media people, and that goes to fans as well. So my hope is that listeners, the Pacers probably aren't going to be as good, but tune in anyway, and you can do us a huge favor. And the more people who listen means the more we get to do this, presumably. I don't think we'll ever be an 82 regular season game reaction podcast, but
I think I would probably collapse if we were an 82 game regular season.
Oh, could you imagine a back-to-back? Dang, oh.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add on to that is that the ones that we did during the regular season, a few of them games against the Raptors, games against the Cavs, games against Minnesota, games against Milwaukee, we were also pointing out things that we noticed about those other teams along the way as well. So for all of the fans of the Milwaukee Bucks, of the Cleveland Cavaliers, of the New York Knicks, of the Oklahoma City Thunder, sometimes just other random fan bases that hopped in here because they wanted to listen about basketball, that will still be present throughout next season's coverage as well.
I'll
This
also
person,
say
yep,
one last thing. If there's anybody watching or listening and you have the means to provide Caitlin and I with a big platform that would have a producer that, like, when Steve Nash and LeBron James mention an action and it shows up on the screen and it's slick and it's good, Caitlin and I would love something like that.
are you saying that my production quality isn't to the
LeBron,
LeBron level?
LeBron, I know you're listening. Just we can be mind the game too.
I'm sure that LeBron is in need of our assistance. Next question, KF. You guys have recorded a lot of video podcasts together, both from the Raptors and Pacers perspectives. What's your favorite episode? They also asked another question, but I'll go ahead and let us answer that one first. I think that our answers are going to be different, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, you know what I do, and I'll give everyone a little insight into mine and Caitlin's friendship. And I think I'll take a little credit, for what I do is I think I'm a good reminder to like enjoy things a bunch. And that's like Caitlin is so much better at analyzing basketball than me. And that's why I say I learn a lot when we do this. But a lot of what I do here is I remove Caitlin just a little bit from analysis and I inject like, it wasn't that fun. Like, wasn't that great? Wasn't that like, and I did the same thing when I was in Indiana. I'm like, man, enjoy this. Like, and I say this, I've said this before, many big games is like, enjoy it. And when I was walking around Indiana and I met people, I'd shake their hand, I'd hold their shoulder and say, enjoy it. Like, have fun. This is a big deal. And so my favorite was when Caitlin would join in with me and be like, whatever, like, hell yeah, let's have fun. Like, this is fun, incredible basketball. And I never felt that more than probably game 1 of the Knicks series, because that was madness. Absolute madness. That was my favorite one we did, if I had to guess.
I knew that we were going to have a different answer.
Yeah.
I feel like from a quality standpoint, the work that we did throughout this run is probably our best, mainly because we know each other a little bit better. I hope that I know a little bit more about basketball now than I did, clear back when we did the first bouncing around episode. But similar to what I said when I revealed that Gilmore Girls is my favorite show, not because it's probably my favorite show, but because I remember watching it with my sister the year before she got married and the fact that we set aside time to do that. I think I would probably say that one of my favorite episodes is not about the Pacers. It's probably about the Raptors, and either the one that we did 2 summers ago with Evan, where we just got to focus on like, how is this Raptors team going to figure out the offense and like what makes a good coach, and just getting to talk basketball with 2 of my friends in a way that was a little less pressure packed for me, or the outside looking in one that we did before you moved to Toronto. Because as I recall, I was the last episode that you did still in Saskatchewan. And when we got done recording that, I was just very happy for you because we both had done analysis remotely for quite some time, and I could tell how excited you were to move and get to do that and be a credentialed writer. So from that aspect of it, that's probably my favorite one.
That's very kind. That's a better answer than mine, probably. But
You weren't gonna say when we ate popsicles together?
I thought that would be too easy, because
It
like,
wasn't the experience I was hoping for because they weren't fully in their popsicle form. Like they were very soft by the time we had eaten them, which was disappointing for me. After, like, if the weather wouldn't have been like upper 80s, I think that they would have survived. But it was a very hot couple of days in Indianapolis. But the second part of this question: if you were going to do a rewatchables episode of a past Pacer game, what game would you choose and why? Sorry, trying to distract myself from the present and immediate future of Pacers basketball. You two are great together.
I think I would like to rewatch with the hindsight of knowing that this team made the finals and went to game 7. That game against the Raptors that we initially watched where it was like, what the hell is going on, man? In November. I think that would be awesome to go back and watch that and be like, this team went to 7. That's probably the
The
one.
team that never turned it over during that like week was having quarters where they were turning it over 10, 12 times. Like, it just absolute insanity. And like, I'm not a body language police type person, but the body language during those games and like every time during halftime, they're like, we're just not playing hard enough. We didn't play hard enough. And a lot of times that can be a cliche, but it's so much applied. When they lost that game to Toronto and they lost the game to Brooklyn, which that was somewhat like they had a lot of logistical travel issues before they got to that game in Brooklyn. And then when it was rock bottom after they lost that game to Charlotte. And I remember that after we recorded that podcast, I was like, maybe when they get to the in-season tournament, because they did not win a single game in the in-season tournament and they have 4 days off, maybe that will be the spark. And it pretty much was. When they got healthy and they got out of that is when the season turned around. But I was actually thinking of like really past games. So the two that I came up with was either game 1 of the 2013 Eastern Conference Finals, when Paul George made the shot to force OT and Frank Vogel subbed Roy Hibbert out twice during key defensive possessions, because we both are Paul George appreciators. And that was really when he was coming into his own. So I think that would be fun to look at. Also, I think just from a strategic sense, it would be fun to go back and look at the way that Pacer team was playing and the way that Miami Heat team was playing. And we could also just sit there and like be like, because I still think that there was a reason for Roy Hibbert not to be out there despite the ire that Frank Vogel took. So we could probably pick that apart a little bit. And then I also thought that looking back at one of the playoff games from the Raptor Pacer series would be fun, because I think that we're both at our best when we get to cover the teams that we cover. And that was another godlike Paul George series. You love DeMar DeRozan. He was playing. And we would have gotten to look at rookie Myles Turner to see how much different Myles Turner is playing today. So those were the ones that I came up with. I didn't
Can I
even really
tell
think
you
about this season.
what was really funny? You're like, that was a godlike Paul George performance. You love DeMar DeRozan. He was playing.
That's pretty much what the series was. Paul George pretty much put the clamps on your beloved DeMar DeRozan. Okay, James, Samson has covered 2 finals teams. I saw his tweet that said he thinks this is the best work he's ever done. I'm curious as to why he thinks that. Was it the Pacers' style of play and the way in which they were seemingly pulling off the impossible, or just his natural maturation / evolution as a writer / podcaster over the last 6 years?
It's neither, actually. This is something that exists completely outside of myself. I try in my life to put myself in a learning position many times over and over. And I think, it's not only that, this podcast that Caitlin and I do is smart and, ahead of many things, but it's also that we're really good friends and that we have really good chemistry. I am a wonderful little plug-in for the audience. No, seriously, I'm a wonderful plug-in for the audience to be here and to react to what you're saying. And I know you've said before, like, Samson reads live film really well, and I'll save it. So I learn a lot working with Caitlin, and I appreciate what I learn because this is my job too elsewhere, and I get to take the things I learn from Caitlin and with Caitlin elsewhere into life and into basketball. And I have a lot of fun. This is the best work I've ever done because I think I have always thought that I do really, really great work in Toronto. And secretly, I've always thought like I'm the best analyst in Toronto. Blake Murphy, that guy sucks. I've always thought I'm the best analyst in Toronto. But this was the first time I ever, and everyone knew it and everyone said it. When we do this podcast and it comes out, everyone knows that's it. That's the best look at it. This is the most in-depth. We're going to get to the nitty-gritty of what swung a game, why it happened, and what motivated it. And that's a cool thing. to know like this is the best. Now, entertainment, Bill Simmons and Zach Lowe hop on a podcast. A lot of people like that. But analysis, Caitlin and I knew when we did something, it was really good. And on top of that, we got to talk about Princess Bride and mosquitoes and Grim Fandango and whatever the hell else we wanted. And people still came along for the ride. And I shaved a mustache into my face and a million other things. And I would have got a tattoo if the Pacers had won. This podcast is not only the best analysis, but it's also just like, I think the vibes are excellent. We're good friends and we have a lot of fun. And the audience doesn't chide us for that. They did at the start. You know, I do funny things. I'm a funny guy. And some people who are watching would comment something like, what the hell is this about? But now I'm understood here. And we're brainy and we're funny and we enjoy ourselves. And that in a job is a blessing beyond anything else. So that is why this is the best Awaker I've ever done. And the work I've enjoyed doing the most. It's probably why we'll have a podcast just to, for people in the future.
I will say on top of that, that what I really enjoyed about that, and not just because you said many nice things about me, which I do appreciate, is that to share a behind the scenes story that in the month and a half roughly when I was out of this work and was contemplating what my future steps were going to be, I vividly remember that I don't know why it came up, but I was like, Samson would never say nice things about himself. He still rarely does in private conversation. And I was like, I just want you to brag and say one thing that you're good at. And he was like, I can type pretty fast. And that is what he came up with. And then as it turns out, like we ended up racing each other at typing because apparently this is a thing that we do when I am fired and I don't have other things to do. But to hear him sit there and say, I think I'm the best analyst in Toronto, look how far we've come.
Yeah.
We have come a long way from, I can type kind of fast. Look at my words per minute.
I was, but yours was faster. And
Was.
Lewis, I think Lewis, his is like ungodly. Lewis can
I
type really
cracked, as I recall, my best time when we were racing was 95. I don't
Yeah.
remember what yours was. But I thought that you had let me win to make me feel good because I was sad. And I was like, you've just slowed yourself down. You've handicapped your typing.
No, I went as fast as I possibly could.
This is the equivalent. It's not you and Trey racing. This is what we do, words per minute.
Well, the good thing is that, you know, when Trey and I race, I win. When you and I race, I lose.
I don't think that there's probably anything athletically that I would be able to top you at. Perhaps. Well, wait. Are you good at jump roping?
No, I'm not good at jump roping. Josh was trying to teach me.
I set my school's jump roping speed record. I held that for like 2 years. So maybe back in my athletic peak, I could have got you at that. That's probably the only thing that I would have, though, I imagine.
You could probably do it now. It was always I jump very well, but it was the coordination of timing thing, everything together. Because I was never, even when I was good at basketball and a young prospect, I was never doing like jump rope training or whatever. So I never got those reps in.
That was like my key conditioning. I liked it better than like running stairs and other stuff that people would do. But next question that is going to make Samson squirt all around, I'm sure. Casey, there is perhaps no more exhausting talking head discourse than discussions of is blank person a superstar? But I'm unfortunately going to ask you to wade in. After his incredibly memorable performance this postseason, let's answer the question once and for all. Is Samson a superstar? He's a superstar at the work, yes. I hope that people, after they read his gamers, for people that subscribe to the website, have come to find out that he has a writing voice that I think is one of one. I knew headed into this season and during the playoffs that I was going to need somebody's help. Like, it is very stressful, and not to bring this up again, but like when you are self-employed trying to run a website and you know, like, I literally cannot get out of bed. I feel wretched. I can't look at my laptop and be like, what am I going to do? There's just not going to be any work. Like when I don't work, there's no work. And so I knew I was going to need somebody's help because covering the playoffs is a really big job for one person to do. And quite frankly, we wouldn't have been able to do these shows if Samson wasn't writing the gamers, because that's what allowed me to stay up until the crack of dawn looking at the film to produce what we were going to do so that we could get on the next day and talk about it. But besides that, like, I wanted somebody who was going to be as good or better at me than what I do. And I knew that there was nobody else that I was going to ask to do that other than Samson. And he met and exceeded all of my expectations in that role, not only with the gamers, but with the freelance pieces that he wrote as well, adding insights on top of things, especially with an outside perspective and really an inside perspective, especially when he wrote the first piece on Pascal Siakam that I thought was wonderful, where he could note and be like, this is different than what he did during the entirety of the time that I watched him with Toronto. His shot looks different to me in this regard. That's context that I wouldn't have been able to offer my readers in the same way that he did, on top of what he adds to the podcast, and on top of the fact that he was still continuing to do draft coverage for his actual full-time salaried position while he was agreeing to do this with me. So yes, like, bar none, definitely Samson is a superstar at this job. He probably would have been a superstar locally playing basketball in my area as well. Like, if I had to guess, like, in terms of the players that my dad coached, from the clips that I've seen at Samson, he's probably like would have been like one of the top 5 players that he coached in his like 12-year tenure. I'm pretty certain of that. So, if you want to know that amount of information. And part, we had different motivations for doing this job. And part of mine was, in addition to one of my goals for this season, was to enjoy my job. So when Samson says, like, he got Caitlin to do that, like, he helped me to achieve one of my goals. The other one was that while what I do is very tiny, I was really hoping to give his work a bigger platform because I think that he deserves it. So if there are Pacer fans that watched this and thought that he was good at his job, I hope that you will continue to follow and keep up with his work on basketball in general with the Raptors as well.
Trey, it happened twice on the podcast, I think, and he breaks out into uproarious laughter every time that he tries to congratulate me on my job. And I never. He loves doing it. But yeah, I'll just swing it back the other way. I've said it before, but doing this with Caitlin is not only incredibly enriching from like someone who's always loved learning about and playing basketball. I learned things from Caitlin about, one of the things I love most in the world, but also I enjoy doing it a bunch. And it was, this is my job, talking about basketball. And, by that measure, it was a dream of mine to cover a finals game. And I got to cover 2 of them because of Caitlin. So I think we did great work. I think I am the 2 to her 1, but being a number 2 on a title team is pretty good. I'm thankful.
And I also will get to have the lifelong memory of watching you try to open Chick-fil-A sauce at the table.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, it's terrible. I feel like, how like a max player can be so good that other guys can get paid the max and it's okay for the structure of the team. Like Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday, whoever you want to be the second best player on a championship team, that doesn't happen unless Giannis is Giannis. You are Giannis.
The funny thing is, to me, is how much you cringe at hearing compliments, whether from me or Trey. And yet it was almost the exact same thing, because when we were walking around at Indy and you were like, how are you handling all of this? I was like, oh, I'm getting very overwhelmed. You didn't have this question, but this one was specifically for me that got sent in later, so I will go ahead and answer it. Life enthusiast, what besides the people, which includes Samson, was the best part about creating such a relatively vast amount of spoken content than you previously have been, at least post Indie Cornrows? Hopefully the combination of me talking over the clips and sharing the clips added to the experience. I know sometimes people will send in and be like, I don't always know what the jargon is that you're writing about. I'm hoping that with the addition of the podcast, that when you're hearing us sometimes say jargon and you're seeing it in visual form while we're also talking about it, that then that adds to what your viewing experience of the Pacers was and what you're getting out of the written content later because that we did this. And also, like, just selfishly for me, it was about wanting to be part of the conversation again. Like, Samson knows what it's like to be behind a paywall. And while I very much value everyone who is willing to pay me to write about the Pacers and read that work, it can be isolating at times and you don't necessarily feel like you're part of it in the same way. And by the two of us podcasting, especially during such an exciting time for the team, while you told me, life enthusiast, not to talk about the people, it was about connections and getting to feel like I was part of something that, like, I wrote that piece about my connections to Pacers basketball. And as you will notice, it was mostly just about me and my immediate family. Because when I was growing up, other than one of my best friends who now lives in Denver, I didn't really have people that I readily talked about the NBA, let alone the Pacers with. There just weren't a lot of those where I lived. Like, I could probably count them on one hand. So, in a sense, through Basketball She Wrote, I really built the community that I never had, and getting to do the content my way and the way that I want to, involving the people that I want to involve, is certainly something that I really appreciate and enjoy. So, I think that's probably the most rewarding aspect of it. I know that Samson loves to podcast. You've said in the past that you appreciate podcasts. Like, you wouldn't give up writing, but I think that if you had to choose, I think that you probably enjoy podcasting more than writing, but I could be putting words in your mouth there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Good. Jeez. I started writing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I would choose. I think podcasting is a little easier. So maybe for like the work life trade off, maybe that would be the one I go to. But writing is really special for the same reason that I detest that people speed up podcasts when they listen to them. Because I think podcasts, well, I guess there's like some work is slop and some is earnest. So, legislate it however you'd like it. But I don't speed up podcasts because the podcasts I listen to for enjoyment. And speeding
Mm-hmm.
up someone's spoken word seems like, why would I do such a thing? Because how they speak is part of their, performance. I don't know how else to put it. And I really like podcasting because it's not as clean as writing is, of course, but you can hear people kind of like kick around ideas and search for the perfect manner of the perfect way to say something, which is why I don't speed it up, which is why I like it. But there's something really great about writing in that, you know, it's like the perfect way to say something. That's why it bothers me that people don't read, because it's like reading, it shows you kind of the final form of human cognition. I think you might think it's spoken word because it's so accessible, but I think the final form of human cognition is the thoughtful, put down, typed or pen or whatever the hell it is. There it is. That's my final word on something. I've said it. I've thought about it. And here it is. That sentence that captures something. I think it's special. So I don't know what I choose, but I do love both. And I'm very happy to do both for Basketball She Wrote. I'm Andrew Nembhard, giving it on both sides of the floor.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say that, like, with the piece that I got to write last night, which is obviously a departure from the things that I normally write, but I think that when I'm writing, I would say that I'm never more myself. And when I'm podcasting, I sense some degree of pressure to be the 100% perfect version of myself. And you know, both of those things can have their rewards. It's good to push yourself into doing things that you wouldn't naturally do and to try and do new things, but I would have a hard time completely giving up writing, and that was why I felt so pressed to get back to doing it when I didn't have it for a month and a half. So you and I both enjoy the written word, though. We both like reading, we both like writing. So
Do you, do you, I feel usually more proud of myself after I've written something than having said something.
yeah.
Yeah. That's mostly how I feel. Because when I think about, like, how our industry it tries to get everybody to like do either podcasts or put work on Twitter. It's just like, do whatever gets the most. But I never feel more like happy or proud of myself than when I really dive in on the subject and do the written work on it. That's when I'm like, man, this was good. And it's the least popular form going forward. Isn't that crazy? Nuts.
When PD Webb found that tweet of mine from 2017 before Game 7, I'm like, what a nerd. What am I talking about there? Like, people can go find it, but he quote tweeted it. It was like an update. And I think what I was tweeting about at the time is I think that's right when it had been announced that Paul George had requested a trade. So I think what I was saying is, because Tony, who is now the host of Locked On Pacers, was not the host of Locked On Pacers at the time when I tweeted that. It was somebody at Indy Cornrows. So I think I was telling people, like, I'm going to go do this in spoken form because I don't think the written word is going to keep up with the news that is coming out about this. But like now in retrospect, it looks hilarious because it's basically like forecasting. The written word isn't going to keep up with news breaking, which in a lot of respects it hasn't.
It's a little disappointing to me. I'm gonna go look at exactly the wording of the tweet and read it for people.
I sound like I almost quote tweeted that and was like, what a moron. Like, what is happening?
So the quote from Caitlin Cooper on the eve of June 18th in 2017 said, "Just made my podcast debut on Locked On Pacers. Fear that the written word won't be able to keep pace with the potential Woj bombs." Well, there you go.
I really do think that I was reacting to Paul George asking a trade and not just like trying to make some really like corny, profound statement on the state of media, but it does come across pretty funny now.
Well,
And I'm surprised that he was able to find that tweet. Honestly, the search function is so broken on Twitter. I can never find my own tweets. So
the really interesting thing, just to keep this podcast going, because why not, is that in society we keep limiting the group. Like what happened, right, is that everyone said everything got democratized, or holy moly, I can't speak. So
not a mixture of when it becomes less
the
democracy
yeah,
and there's less
yes.
monetization.
Yeah, so the democratization of everything, everyone's like, well, the internet, everyone has a voice now. But what you guys didn't realize is that Stephen A. Smith comments on everything now, and Stephen A. Smith might run for office now, and everyone who's popular now has an opinion on everything. And it wasn't actually a democratization of opinions. It just funneled them all towards really big talking heads and figures who now dominate everything and are able to weigh in on the important issues of our age more easily and actually sway opinion, despite having no right or insights, just because they're popular and they're able to react in live time with a big audience. And that is why the written word going away is an absolute travesty.
That's why I have to resist the urge sometimes to react to things on Twitter that are very clearly just hoping that I'm going to react to them on Twitter. But this is the end of the mailbag. These are the questions that were sent in. There were a lot of questions sent in. Some of them coming from the entire branch of, what will this team look like without Tyrese? What does this mean for Nembhard? And that's certainly going to be fleshed out throughout the off season to come. And some of the other questions that were sent in that were perhaps more basketball specific, I might end up turning into full articles because I had a really good time doing that during August last year with some of the stuff that you sent. I wanted to get the ones that were about both of us and things that Samson covered specifically on for this last episode of what this season was. So I don't think I really have anything else extra to say or to add other than just a thank you to Samson for being willing to do this with me, for giving up so much of his time, and for, I guess, the Raptors fan base for being willing to share him, and for Raptors Republic for being willing to share him and his talent, which I really appreciate.
I'm not leaving. What's the Wolf of Wall Street? I'm not leaving. I'm not fucking leaving. Caitlin and I will have more stuff this summer. It won't just be her; it'll be us in some capacity. And I will keep tabs on the indie boys in whatever capacity they show up, despite not being involved in the first round of the draft at Summer League. And there'll be more work. I still have to finish my piece on my trip to Indy and experiencing Indy and all that kind of stuff. So, and I think I want to write a piece about Tyrese. something about how he taught me basketball to some degree, because it was special to watch a player like him, because I felt like I understood everything really well when the Raptors won the championship. But Tyrese was always able to accomplish things that were just outside my understanding or knowing that I would come to understand later, which is a cool thing. Always a learning opportunity to watch somebody who operates with a different verve.
At some point, I will watch The Princess Bride.
Well,
I've
I
made this
know
commitment.
I
I will
watched
do it this off season. It will be done.
this week, more like. Get to it. It's chop chop.
I have some pressing meetings to take over the coming days, but
Yes, you do. And the first one is with me after this podcast. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't liked an episode yet, make sure to like this one. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe. If you haven't commented, comment and tell us something. Anything. Whatever it is. I'm sure it'll be interesting. Thanks for tuning in with us. And if you'd like to support us as a parting gift for all the coverage, you can subscribe over at Basketball She Wrote on Patreon. It's how we make the money. It's how we do the stuff over here. Caitlin, anything before I sign us off?
no, hopefully this was a valuable session of Pacers therapy for everyone who needed it. And it was free. What do you know?
Super duper, Miss Cooper.
No, that
Thank
was
you.
rooted it out weeks ago.
Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate you very much. And whether you got into this in the morning or at night, from myself and Caitlin, have a blessed day and goodbye.